This is the War Dog. Welcome to Comic Book Theater with my guest host, JR. What's going on, JR?
How's it going, War Dog?
Awesome. We got a really awesome show for you guys today. We have the Frazettas, Frank Jr., and I'm sorry, I forgot.
Lori.
Okay. All right. So we have got the Frazettas from the Frazetta Museum. How are you guys doing? We're excited to have you guys.
We're doing fine. Thank you for having us.
John, why don't you tell us what we're going to do here, and we'll roll with the punches.
Well, I tell you what, thanks for the introduction there, War Dog. We are live with the Frank Frazetta Jr. and Lori from the Frazetta Art Museum, and we're going to talk all things Frank Frazetta today, guys. This is going to be if you're a fan of Frank Frazetta, he really doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to ask you guys, talk to us a little bit real quick, give us an introduction to the museum, and kind of what is the goal of the museum that you guys are running there, and who else helping you run the museum?
Well, welcome to the Frazetta Art Museum. Thank you guys for having us. This is great. This is our first, so it's all new. So thank you for having us on. So this museum is run by Frank Jr. This is his collection. And it's run by him, me, and our son, William. And we're open every Thursday through Sunday from 10 to 4. And as well, if anybody can't come on those days and needs to come on a day other than that, we will always open for anyone to see this museum. This museum is for everyone to see. We want everyone to be able to view this art and be inspired, as Ellie and Frank did. It's feet away from their home in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. They built this museum in the year 2000, right next to their home. And they passed away, and Ellie passed in 2009. Ellie was Frank's wife. She passed in 2009. He passed a year later in 2010. After that, once Frank got his share of the art, was split. He got his share. We opened this museum in 2013. So we've been open now for this is our 7th year. And we're open all year round. And we'd love for everyone to come see. We give personal tours around the museum and tell stories because every painting has a story. So we give a story, the story with each piece of art that we know. And it's great. You have to see a piece in person.
And what makes this museum unique over the other three? This was the third museum. The first was in East Stroudsburg on the 3rd floor, and that opened in '85. Then they resided to Florida, Boca Grande, where my dad wanted to eventually move. Sort of a small tropical paradise, but it was too warm, too humid for him. And it was a different clientele based on it. More of the art theme down there in galleries, lighthouses, things of that nature, because it was on the ocean. So we decided to move back here. This is where we moved in 1971 from Brooklyn. Now, what makes this museum special is any art that was done from 71 Tiny Pass would have been done on a state here, just 100 feet away from the museum. Now, the reason the museum was built here, because prior to building this, Mom and Dad were looking in the area for a big, nice building or another home to put the art in. And the more we looked into it, the more thought in the back of my mom's mind and my dad's was a fire hazard. And once the flames hit an art museum, that's the end of it. So we eventually decided to put it just outside the house for security reasons, built it out of solid concrete, and done with all the high-tech protections for that reason. My dad designed the exterior of the museum, more of a Spanish style, Mexican tile roof, and I did the interior. I did some architectural work in high school. So it's set up beautifully. It's right now we have about 40 original oil paintings here. The art was split up 4 ways after the passing of the parents, so this is my personal collection. For people who come in here, they're overwhelmed by, wow, how much art can you do in his life? In actuality, this museum is approximately 2,000 square feet to house all my dad's art that he did probably from a young man to his passing. we need a museum probably the size of George Lucas's museum that he just opened. He's lived tens, if not hundreds of thousands of drawings in his lifetime. It's overwhelming. And my wife and I are just astounded by any particular day. We just go on the internet and we see a drawing. My dad did this. My dad did this. It's just endless. He was known for his speed. He would just bash these paintings out. Almost everything on the wall here was done in one evening. And the reason for that is, I mean, we'll get into this later in the interview, but his true love in life was baseball. And that's my opinion now that I do a little art on the side. This was my dad's escape because he was not a prisoner to the art. It was a way to make a living. It was in his blood. He had a gift from above that he could just, pop these things out with little thought or process. No references in books, no models. He just did it. He had that special gift. So he'd bash his paintings out. He'd have a 30-day deadline and wait till day 29 to start it. Just so he could play ball for the rest of the week.
Oh, wow.
Fabulous athlete. He was drafted to play professional baseball in 1947 and 48. How good he was, I was drafted when I was 18. And my dad and I and my brother and friends in the neighborhood here used to play stickball just outside the museum before it was built. And my dad in his 50s was still as good as I was. He was basically past his prime according to statistics in baseball. He was an incredible athlete. But my dad was basically all physical. He wasn't a big guy, but he was lean, he was tough, where I did more of a scientific approach to what I did in sports. But he was a wonderful individual, and anybody who had the opportunity to meet him over the years was really, truly blessed because he wasn't who he was. Art was a way to feed his family, keep mom quiet and happy, and the rest of the time it was, Dad, let's go play stickball. He'd put the paintbrush down, clean it, and run right outside. He was just incredible.
So basically just a big kid at heart, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now I know that there was, for me personally, before we started, since we're on baseball, before we started, I had a little bit of confusion on who he was a fan of initially, and you guys explained this to me via text. But he's a New York kid originally. How did, and guys, this is for anybody who's watching. Of course, we're going to talk about the art, but this is also just for us to get a little bit of insight that you're not going to get anywhere else. You can see the art, but you're not going to get these stories anywhere else. Who was he a fan of growing up, and how did his fandom for baseball, how did that evolve over the years?
Well, he was born in 1928, so baseball was still in its early stages. But he said Brooklyn, where he lives, not like it is today. There'd be a few houses on a block, and down the street would be a huge farm. So it wasn't like it was today. So he really said he didn't start playing baseball until he was nearly 15. He was just an incredible athlete. And growing up as a young boy, he said he used to throw a lot of rocks. And over time, he developed a cannon for an arm. He threw the ball well over 100 miles an hour, for sure. For sure. I mean, there's a video that they did of my dad. He threw a baseball from home plate at Lincoln High School over the right center field roof of the school. And the school was, I lasered, was 290 to the base. So now you go up 50 feet, and for ball to go over top of that, it's well over 400 feet. But as far as baseball, he lived in Brooklyn. It wasn't like it was today with the athletes. They were mingled with the people in the neighborhood. It was the Brooklyn Dodgers. My dad said Gil Hodges, Carl Furillo, all those guys just would go right down to Coney Island with the convertibles on their days off. He goes, you fantasize and you idolize these baseball players, but when you get up close to them, he said, you just cannot believe the size of these guys. He goes, never underestimate a professional. He said, Carl Furillo would have his arm on the side of the convertible, and he goes, guys are like, wow, the guys are like gigantic. So that was part of my dad's inspiration to be a ball player. But he won a few awards and most valuable players in the Sandlot League in Marine Park in Brooklyn. And back in those days, they would have one of the baseball players from the Dodgers challenge whoever had the best week in the Sandlot League. And I still have the original postcard that was sent to my dad that said, "Congratulations, Frank Frazetta. You have been privileged to challenge Gil Hodges, who was, a superstar baseball player, catcher for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and challenge him at different facets of baseball that weekend." And sadly, Gil Hodges, something came up in the family. He couldn't go down, but that never materialized. But my dad was really looking forward to that. And that's how ball players were back then. It's not like today, hundreds of millions of dollars and they're spoiled and pompous.
Oh yeah, no. Well, I was gonna say, I have to remind my kids that back in the day, ball players had to get winter jobs and stuff like that. They weren't just full-time ball players. These guys who are playing today, full-time, that's their only job. They just train. That's all they do. So it's just a different feel for the way ball is played. Now he grew up a Dodgers fan. When they moved to LA, was he still a Dodgers fan, or did he kind of migrate away from the Dodgers at that point?
Well, he was a Dodgers fan, but Mickey Mantle was, it didn't matter what team you favored. Mickey Mantle was a fan of everybody because of his awesome power. Southern kid from Oklahoma, came up and hit, tape measure home runs. My dad used to speak of that all the time when my dad would go to Yankee Stadium and see hit balls off the facade, the closest to ever coming out of hitting at a Yankee Stadium. So that was his next superstar. And then after that, from 2 years old, he was grooming me to be a professional baseball player. We still have videos of him pitching to me in a small Brooklyn apartment. But then we became Met fans because the Yankees started to fade away, and then they won in '69. And that was kind of his following from there on out. But he liked all teams, and I'll tell you, as a perfect example, at the end of the year when it came to the World Series, when the baseball season finally came to an end, there was nobody more depressed than my dad. He'd rather see his team go to 7 games in a World Series just to see the 7 games instead of sweeping somebody in 4. He was like bummed out the season was over. He wasn't a football fan until he was 42. So baseball was his prime joy and love. I mean, he had baseball game from 71 on. There was always a baseball game on according to paintings.
Oh,
Game or Yankee game, it didn't matter.
Did he ever do like any baseball inspired paintings? I mean, I've seen paintings. Did he ever like do anything like that?
Not to my knowledge. We have a couple of pen and ink sketches he did over his lifetime. They're called like remembrances, things he did as a young man that he tells stories about. He's a great storyteller. And he only had so many, but he repeated them. And we have one where he threw the baseball over the school, and another time where he hit somebody in the rear end with an apple in Brooklyn. He was kind of got nasty to him when they came in our yard and trespassed and tried to get over the big picket fence, and he turned around and threw an apple and bullseye. That's such a great accuracy he had. That was another amazing thing, to throw it that hard and that accurate.
So when you played catch with him, did you have a sore hand? I remember when I'd play catch with my dad, and he'd just let him whiz, and my hand would be like, oh God,
He wasn't a show off at all. Not at all. No, that's not who he was. He knew his ability, and he didn't have to brag about it. He said, your talent will prove itself. Because anybody you met who's had to talk and brag about how good they were, weren't that good. We just wished they were. We'd sit out here, like I said, play stickball. We introduced the Poconos to stickball. They had no clue what that was. But he didn't like to play golf as well. But it wasn't about the score, even though he could shoot a pretty good game. He just hit the ball as hard as he could. That's all that mattered to him.
He did ask once, my son William, he asked him in his later years if he made a mistake not going after his dream of baseball versus the art. And my son William said, Grandpa, no, this is the legacy you needed to leave behind. And but I think he always wondered if that was a road he should have gone down.
Well, if it wasn't for the money, I mean, my dad was never about the money, but when they offered him $3,000 a year to be a baseball player, and he was making at that time a lot of money in the comic world, he was a homebody. He stayed on in Coney Island his whole life. Came up here, he stayed here, never traveled. You know, he had plenty of money. He could have went anywhere, had a mansion, had fancy cars. It's not what was important to him. You know?
He was a family man.
Yeah.
And to leave his family with baseball, he just felt he'd have to go on the road and leave his family. And I think his family was his biggest.
Yeah.
His
Well, that was on the
biggest
top.
influence
Yeah,
was his
that goes without
family.
saying.
His wife and his children, Lord, and then his grandchildren. That was the most important thing in his life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that actually brings up another something that I found very interesting is your mom, Mrs. Frazetta, was his business manager for a good portion of time as well. Was that a very early thing for him? Like as soon as they were married, that she became his business manager? Or did that just kind of evolve out of necessity?
Well, when they first got married, he was still working for Al Cap. So the oil paintings and paperback, the value of the whoever he worked for retained the artwork. So there wasn't something to protect. But then when he left Cap in 61, I believe, or 63, he went on his own and started doing paperback books for A-Ray Burroughs. And they just ripped the artist off. I mean, he'd give them very little pay and they retained the artwork. Then my dad found out that not only did they give him $125, use the artwork for the covers and marketing their stories, they would sell his art, he found out, behind his back for 4 times more than what they paid him for. And that's when he demanded his art back with a pay cut. But just after that, Mom did become the agent and make the business deals. My dad was about doing the art, and that was it. And Mom took over the business, and she was a tough agent. Nobody wanted to deal with her, and if they did, they had to do it Ellie's way.
But she protected him.
Yeah.
Artists need someone to protect them because they do get taken advantage of. And she did not allow anyone to take advantage of Frank. She was the protector of Frank and the art, and that was her role.
Yeah.
That was her role.
In the early 70s, my dad was the first fantasy illustrator who was world famous at that time, pretty much. And so she could get a comic book deal, not a comic book deal, a calendar deal, and make $50,000 from a calendar. And then off a book, huge advances, you know, $50,000, $70,000 advances, totally unheard of. For was the one, and from there, his talent inspired so many other artists in this world to follow in his footsteps. You know, the only thing my dad was down about people who were inspired by him, he didn't want them to just swipe from him. I mean, he understood that, but he said, there's one Frank Frazetta. Now learn from me, take from other artists, and become yourself. And that was
right.
What Dad wished the other artists would do. But the only thing I hear other artists would say to my dad, he goes, yeah, but Mr. Frazetta, you don't understand. I go to publishers and I show them my portfolio, and they said, we want it to look like that, pointing to one of my dad's books. He goes, well, he said the same thing to me. He goes, and you know, eventually I just had to part my own way, and that was it. I mean, I do reproductions of my dad. I copy his, and some really, really good, but it's not coming from my heart because it's his, so I don't get any personal integrity from it. Makes me build my integrity up at all because it's a copy. And my dad, he'd be, wow, beautiful job, keep it up. But after so much time, he'd say, okay, well, let's get your own stuff going here. And that's what he made me do. But then it was just too much pressure.
Well, I imagine.
Footsteps. It was just, I didn't need that headache.
No, I can imagine that. I can imagine that. Sons following in their father's footsteps very often can be very challenging, especially when folks expect you to do exactly what he did. If you have your own way of doing something, like you said, you want it to be yours. That's absolutely, I can absolutely see that. So, you know, we're kind of getting into talking about some of the art and stuff like that. One thing that I'm curious about before we go full blown into the art itself, was there a time that, Frank, that you realized, hey, dad's a big deal, he's not just dad anymore, but that you realized there's something else, like next level going on here? Was there a point in time in your life you realized that, or were you around it in your life, and it just has always been that way?
My dad to his children were dad. That was it. He wasn't even an artist to us. He wasn't portraying himself as that. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to be dad, known as dad. And the first time, maybe at 13 years old, we went to conventions and people asked for his autograph. He got a taste of it there. And he smiled to us if he was signing something, but never, when we got home, he goes, "What do you think of that kid?" He didn't have that sort of ego. But when Clint Eastwood came out to the house in 1977, then we realized he was well known by some of the biggest stars in the world. And I guess that was the start of it. But there again, right after that, it wasn't about dad. It never was. I remember the funniest thing my dad said, because I heard Clint Eastwood talking in the back room, my father, and I heard Clint's voice because I was a fan of his from the Dirty Harry movies. And I walked in, and my dad goes, "I say hello to Clint." And I reached my hand out, and I had to look up like at the ceiling because he was like 6'4". And he looked just like my dad when he was young, handsome, lean, big green eyes, and just a super laid back mannerism, just like my dad. And after he left, I said to my dad, I said, "It's a good looking guy, isn't he, Pop?" He goes, "Well, he thinks he is." And that's the way my dad was. So my dad said it was funny to see these big stars come to introduce themselves to my dad, and they were more nervous than he was. Because my dad was never impressed by movie stars, and because you know what? They're no different than us. And one day when they're out of work, they'll be doing the same thing we are. So you much somebody pull up to the museum with an old rusted car and a camera around his neck, who's true to himself, and some guy's trying to show off in his Ferrari and his suit. And like Mrs. Frazetta would rather go to the guy with the Ferrari because he's got some money to buy something. But that's the way they were. They were
The business.
Into the spectrums. Dad had no interest in. I mean, he loved his fans, he appreciated them, but it wasn't about that. Mom was the one who was an incredible businesswoman, just like we're almost turning into Mr. and Mrs. Frazetta. I can't touch anything and she yells at me. I can't have a TV either. She's a wonderful businesswoman as well. I mean, if somebody wants to buy an autographed book, she won't sell it. "I can get this for that." I said, "It's not worth that much." "Yes, it is." "Okay, you say so." Because my dad, at the end of his life, my mom was getting $250 for an autograph. There's very few people, movie stars, sports athletes, who get nearly that number for an autograph besides Tiger Woods. And the only reason she did that is my dad felt so bad doing that for people. It was like $250 for a signature. My dad felt so bad, not even guilty, because he never got the money. It went through his hands. And my mom did that basically to weed out the people who just wanted to meet my dad. People who, they express that they're a big shot, they want to spend a lot of money. And she'd cater to them and find out the guy just wanted to come in the house and meet my dad, shake his hands, and then leave. So she just jacked the price up and said, if they give her a little face when she says $250, then she knows what she's dealing with, and that's why she did it. But my dad would have signed autographs from here to California for nothing.
If you would walk in a studio today, and if he was doing a sketch, and you'd say, "Wow, Frank, that's really good," and be like, "Yeah, you like it? Here you go." So, and she knew that of him. That's why she had to protect him, because he didn't value his art. He didn't value his craft.
You know what?
Value cameras.
He knew what it was worth. He knew the art was worth, but he didn't want it because he could do a beautiful little sketch in 5 minutes. It looks great. But the mom herself $4,000 at the time. You know, my dad would do a little doodle, like she says, and swap for a camera, because the camera was worth $2,000 or $3,000. Then my mom would find out.
Yeah, not good.
See you later, Mom.
So
my dad said, "Don't leave."
That's awesome, because that's just like comic book nerds everywhere, not actually showing the wife the receipt for the stack of comic books they walk in that thick, and they're like, "Yeah, you should have seen the deal I got on these. These fell off the back of the truck, and yeah, this is awesome," you know. So yeah, that's it's funny to hear that, because that's really relatable to the rest of us for sure. Real quick, I do have one quick question. This is actually going to help us transition into talking about maybe some of the specific pieces of art or some of that. Ryan is asking, what was the earliest work that he actually got paid for? Because my understanding is he was 16 whenever he sold his first art. Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly, or was it earlier maybe?
Well, yeah, but, oh, okay, all right. So when he was 3 years old, he did this amazing piece of art. I should see if I can take it off the wall. But his grandmother gave him 2 pennies for that piece of art, which we have hanging on the wall, and we have the 2 pennies that she gave him, which is really cool. So actually, she was his first commission job at 3.
That's awesome.
It then go on to say what then his real.
After that, his first character that he copyrighted was the Snowman in 1944. Now that was published in Tally Ho. So that would assume that would be his first paid job, even though I know he did little drawings for people, but I'm sure he didn't get any money for it or asked for money. I know he said his sister would steal all his little homemade comic books and swap them for real comic books for kids on the block. But I can't imagine my dad at a latter stage when he was famous, he gave his art away and he charged anybody when he was 10 or 12. So I'm sure that's around 15 or 16.
Right.
One of the things that I wondered was like, who inspired him? I mean, we talked about the baseball art, but it sounds like he started with art at 3 years old. Maybe nobody inspired him, but was there any other painters or artists that he really liked?
Not at 3 years old. At 3 years old, this was a gift that he had. You're talking a whole different time. You're talking Depression, no TVs. I don't even know. I guess there was radios at the time. So if you wanted to have fun, you were thrown out of the house until it was dark, no matter the weather. He came in the house, and I guess he said he would draw all the time, but his parents, his dad was from Italy, came over in, I think, 1904, and there was no books in the house, no paper. So he said he'd actually rummage through garbage pails outside in the house to find paper to draw on. Toilet papers, to that level, drawing toilet paper, get his mom's soap and carve with that. So this was just something he had a love for. He loved all mediums of art except for charcoal. If anybody's going to ask that question, just because it was too messy. He didn't enjoy that. But as far as artwork, there was just nothing in the house for him to draw on. And after his grandma gave him the pennies and saw that he had very little paper or art supplies, he said what was gold to him. His grandma came in, I think, at Christmas time and gave him a stack of blank paper. And she worked for an office somewhere. He said that was like gold to him. Hundreds of sheets of blank paper. He said he'd draw inside of books with blank pages. So he had an incredible imagination. But as he progressed and became into his career in art, he did like Hal Foster with Tarzan. That was one of the artists he was inspired by. St. John a little bit. After that, I can't tell you too much, but what inspired him as far as creating these crazy mystical characters would have been Frankenstein, he told me, and the original King Kong. You're talking King Kong in 1933 was better than any film made today, in my opinion, and my dad's opinion. And you got to see it on a movie screen, not on a little television. So he goes, when you saw Kong 35 feet high, it was the real deal. So it was something you go home and just stare at the ceiling all night, he told me. So same with Frankenstein.
I know that, and that's what you're relaying to us about his early age and his grandma fostering his talent that way. That's something that we have always been fans of, is people getting their kids into art. At least let them experiment with it. And if they've got a talent, if they've got a love, man, just go at it. That is one thing that I love social media for these days, is there are a few, not a lot, there are a few current artists that will actually show what they were working on at 9 years old or 5 years old or 6 years old, and then show the equivalent that they've done as an adult, as a published work. And, just kind of as a reminder for parents to say, hey, if your kids are showing interest, foster that talent, do something to encourage them. You may have there's never going to be another Frank Frazetta, but you may have the next great artist, but you gotta let them know that it's okay to do that. Too often we kind of gravitate towards be a lawyer, be a doctor, lawyers and doctors need art too. They just do. So kind of like him asking if he chose the wrong path going with art instead of baseball. I would happen to agree that the art is where it's at for sure.
He has very little regrets. That, because it wasn't about the money. He was sort of a show off when he got on the baseball field when it came to athleticism. But other than that, no. I mean, he was very happy because if he would have had to be at every baseball game practice, as much as he loved it, it was still work, even though it was something he loved to do. Mm-hmm. And it was something, and that's why he pushed it on me as a young boy. He goes, get up when you want, do it when you want, take off when you want. Don't listen to any crummy boss who tells you what to do. He goes, you got your own life, your own leisurely time. He goes, what job do you have that? He goes, you need so much money? What do you need that you can't have with this job? And that's what he told me. He was exactly right. I mean, where you get up when you want. We slept till usually 10, 11 because his art was done during the evening hours. And it's a scientific fact that people are artistic, their brains stimulate at 7 in the evening later. And that's why they sleep later. I don't know. That's what I was told. It's the same with me. I can't draw or paint during the day. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I'm more of a vampire kind of guy. So that's who I am. But.
Right on. So now real quick, so we're getting more into the art itself. You guys are sitting in front of two amazing pieces right there. What are the names of each one of those? And if there was a specific thing, a song or something that inspired that you're aware of, if you'd share that with us, that would be awesome.
Well, this is Wild Ride. This is one of my favorite ones. Started in California. This one was redone three or four times. There's like three, yeah, there's a lot of versions of it. But this is one of my favorite. It's hard to see. You have to see it in person to really appreciate it.
The vision of the woman. 20 times.
He did her, a lot of times. You can see he did it so many times that there's some cracking going on because he put so much paint, just layered and layered and layered. But this one, just the colors are spectacular. You really can't. You have to see it in person to really appreciate and the depth of it. It's an amazing piece.
And my dad was always modest. I remember one time telling my dad when I was learning how to paint from him, I said, Pop, I said, anatomy I have no interest in, which he said that's the first thing you should know before you attempt to go into this field, probably any field with humans in it. I said, I'm going to do this for my wife for a gift, but I'm not going to do the horses of women. I'll just do the beautiful scene. He looks at me, and he was always very positive. I said, what? He goes, you're going to do that painting? I said, yeah. You're going to do that painting. You're going to do that ocean and that sunlight? I said, yeah. He goes, you? Whoa, what are you talking about, Pop? I thought you were supposed to give me some kick in the butt. Yeah, he goes, you realize how many colors are in that oil painting? Just that wave alone? I said, no, how many? He goes, probably about 2,000 colors. I said, 2,000 colors? Well, I only got 6 colors in my paint set. He goes, well, there's your first problem. So I went home and tried to start it. And my dad always told me, that's like you said with a professional athlete, never underestimate a profession. He goes, the worst professional baseball players, if you met him in person, is far better than anybody you ever played with. And same with this painting. He told me, he goes, the most simplistic paintings on the wall that look the easiest are probably the most difficult. And he's within reason. So I tried to do that painting, blow it up on a projector and trace it. Okay, I got it. As soon as you get into those greens and the pinks on the sand, it's like, I worked at it for about an hour. Walked back, I lived across the field. Dad was right next to us here. Walked back into a studio about an hour later, left the painting over there. Actually, I put it in the corner. And he's like, hey, how you doing? He goes, where's the painting? With a smirk on his face. Excuse me? He goes, where's the painting? How'd you make it? What do you mean? He goes, what's the problem? Couldn't do it. He was just being a wise ass to me. He wasn't doing it to be sarcastic, just saying, not so easy, huh? Well, a little better than you think. And that's about how he ended. I said, all right, Pop, I know. Next time we go golfing and you want to hit a low fade. I said, yes, me. We always joke around. He was just a sweetheart the way he came forward and addressed you with it. It happened a couple of times. I did a painting of an elephant from an African book, big, beautiful orange sunset in Africa. Brought it to my dad. I gave it to him. Because the way it worked with my dad's lessons, I'd do the best I could, bring it to his house, show it to him. So what do you think? Okay, this is nice. Don't touch that. This has to be dressed for what area. Do this, do that. Okay, I go back, come back. So I bring the painting over, and he's like, big bright sky with the elephant was. Where the hell did you find that sky from? I said, excuse me? Because whatever he said, he was always right, no matter how much proof I had to say he was wrong. He goes, well, where did you get a sky like that? I said, Dad, it's Africa, 120 degrees, humid, beautiful sunset, and orange and yellow. He goes, there's no such thing. And I said, I got him. I got the book at the house with the picture, the background. I stole it. I'm going to show him. I'm going to prove him wrong for one. Yeah, Dad, I'll be right back. I'm going to go get that book. Oh, yeah, I'll be waiting. I go home, I get the book, I open it up, it's like, oh, shit. That's not the same color. So I put it down, went back to us, goes, hey, where's the book? Sun's like that, is there? No sunsets like that in Africa, is there, son? I said, no. He goes, don't ever argue with me about colors. I said, yeah, all right, Pop, you got it. You got it. He just knew it. Just like he said, there's no such thing as black. Even a black and white is not a color. He said, there's no black, because I did black in the painting. He goes, where do you get black from? I said, it's black. He goes, there's no black. Even black has blue in it. I said, really? He goes, a black bear is not black, it's got blue in it. A black cat has brown and blue in it. I said, really? So I said, let me show you, Pop. It was a rainy day. Across the lake, the forest was dark, a lot of heavy clouds, and the trees were all wet at the base, and you could see the bark was black to me. I said, look at those trees at the bottom. It's black. He goes, that's not black. He goes, what are you, colorblind? I said, I don't know. It's not black. I said, yeah, let's go take a walk. So it's about 400 yards away. We're walking, and the closer we got, the more it turns brown from black. And I get about halfway there, he goes, that still look like black to you, son? No. Okay, let's go back home. We're getting wet. I have to turn around and go back. I just saw things. Then I did find out.
But the funny thing is, Frank never traveled. He never went anywhere. He didn't go to Europe. He didn't go to these awesome beaches. Frank just knew. He just instinctively knew what colors. He knew what things looked like without ever experiencing or seeing it in person, which is crazy. They said one time, didn't they say, they told Frank, was it Phalangia, his instructor, he had an instructor for a very short time in his life. The teachers, when he was in grade school, the parents got called into school. I think he was like first grade, 8 years old, was called into the school. The parents were called in and they said, this kid's got something unique. You need to enroll him in some kind of an art school. So the parents enrolled him in the Brooklyn Fine Academy of Art, and there the owner saw Frank had this gift, took Frank under his wing. He was going to take Frank to Europe to study fine art, but when Frank was 12 years old, the man passed away. So he only was with him from 8 to 12. But I think he asked Frank to, was it him that asked Frank to draw the bunny rabbit, and Frank didn't know? Well, then it was the art instructor said to Frank when he came in, he said, I want you to draw some ducks in a pond. And he left Frank for like 5 minutes. He came back and he said, Mama mia, we got a genius here. He said it was unbelievable, the ducks in the pond that he drew. But then the rabbit story was then tell about the rabbit story.
Yeah, this was told in the documentary. Al Williamson, they were doing a John Wayne comic book. There was a scene with a rabbit. And everybody knows what a rabbit looks like until you try to draw it. And he said, sitting with my dad. He goes, Frank, why don't you do the rabbit? So he said, my dad sat there with the pencil in his hand, closed his eyes for a minute like this, and drew a rabbit. And it looked perfect. And it wasn't your normal profile rabbit you see on your Easter candy. It was the cutest little thing with his ears back and with his legs turned at a crazy angle. The bizarre bizarre. The way he draws things are just so crazy, maybe not fathomable in real life, but it's believable the way he does it. He said he always tried to make the unbelievable believable, which he does. And like I said, he had a photographic memory as well. That's what she was trying to say, because that's why I believe in reincarnation, without a doubt. I mean, your genes are passed on. But they said my dad did drawings when he was 3 and 4 years old, when he never was out of Brooklyn, of things that he'd never seen before. That made no sense.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's
things that
crazy.
he'd never seen before. So how can he do it?
Right. Well, yeah, if he doesn't have the experience, let's be real, nobody's got any life experience at 3 years old, really. There's something there where he's, like you say, it's a gift. There's no doubt about that. Now, this is a question I know that you guys get often, so I know how you're going to answer it, but it's something that people still want to know. William's asking in the chat, what are your guys' favorite pieces of art from there in the Frank Frazetta Museum?
I have no favorites personally. I have favorite things about each piece, because when I walk around on a tour and I tell the stories to a piece, I have favorite things about each piece. Silver Warrior, for example, it's my favorite because it's one of my favorites because I ask people, there's something important missing to that painting when you look at it, and a lot of people can't see what it is, and I'm not going to tell you because you have to come see it and hear the story here. But there's something important missing, and it doesn't really technically
left out deliberately.
Right, he did it on purpose, but not many people can see what it is. So that's my favorite, because they'll stand in front of that painting and try and guess it and can't get it. But the Huns is my favorite for a 3D value. When you look at that painting, the 3D value in person, you would swear those horses were coming right out of that painting. It's crazy. So I can go around and tell you my favorite thing of each piece, but I don't specifically have a favorite piece.
You can't have a favorite.
It's like your children. How do you have a favorite? You like different things about each one. Yeah. Do you have a favorite?
No, you can't, because if you have a favorite in a year, 2 or 5 years, you'll favor something else. You can only look at something so magnificent, so long to where you lose a little bit of the initial shock, overwhelming, whatever it might be, and then you see something just about as good that you like as much later. So my dad didn't have any favorite. I asked him many times. He said he loved them all. Some were much better than others, but if he had to pick one, he said, pick one, he said it would have been the Cat Girl. Would have been, he said, of the Conan paintings, which there was 9 of.
Right.
We're not allowed to call it Conan, I mean, speech we can't. He said the Indomitable was the best artistic-wise masterpiece, even though it's not very popular. He says it's just too deep for most people. He goes, a true artist would understand why it's a masterpiece. But most people, like anybody walking off the street, you see something they love, it's the art value of, wow, that's great. If you're sitting there trying to go through it, why it's great, then you're beyond an art level. That's it, you got some problems unless you want to learn about art. You look at a painting, it's gorgeous, but why? Who cares why? It's beautiful. Whether it be a barbarian, whether it be a warrior, whether it be a beautiful woman, whether it be a lighthouse, an ocean scene, if you love it, you love it. It's personal taste. You can't tell somebody, oh, you're an idiot, I don't like that. Who cares?
I think you guys have done a great job on making people, anybody who watches this is probably thinking, God, I really want to go there and look at that. Like the one behind you with 2,000 colors, I can't even imagine how awesome it looks in person. And then like pointing out things that are missing. God, I mean, I like, how long do people, when they come to the museum, do they spend lots of time there? I could imagine just being there for like 2 hours and just standing there staring at a picture for like 15 minutes.
Some people, if they're hard pressed for time, they try really hard, but some people stay the whole day, the whole 6 hours, and just, and come back. Because with Frank's art, you could come one time, it's so visually overloading. Your brain like shuts out.
If you know who he is and you follow him, it's overwhelming. If you're
It's
just an art
visually
fan,
overwhelming.
it's different.
But people will come back a second time or a third time and say, that painting wasn't hung on the wall the last time I was here. I'm like, yes, it was. They're like, no, it wasn't, because there's such a visual overload in here. I think your brain can only like take in so much. But some people will stay the whole time and come back multiple times because it's just so much to see. And we're in here all the time, and I have to say I never tire of being in here. We have what I think, you know, because I only knew Frank as dad and grandpa. 40 years I've been in the family. I never knew Frank as the artist. He kept that so private into himself. Because as soon as I'd walk in with the kids, he'd get right down on the floor and start playing with them, because that's what was important to him. So I never knew him as the artist. So when he had passed away and we had this responsibility of this museum, I became a huge fan, like everybody else, because I never knew this part of him. But what amazes me is that his art emotionally, so one biggest thing I can see from people, his art emotionally bound you to his art. We have people coming in here, a grown man standing in front of a piece of art, and tears are running out of his eyes. And he said, I remember that exact moment when my mother took me in the corner store when I was 7 years old, and I begged my mom to give me a dime for that comic book. He said that one image laid the path for his, you know, for the rest of his life. He became an artist because of it. But I hear that story over and over and over again. One artist called me when we first opened up and said that he was, as a young boy, he was in and out of foster homes, and he said he was abused. He was abused physically, emotionally, sexually abused as a small child. And he said the only thing that kept him from taking his life is, he said, at night when everybody go to sleep, he would take one of the paperbacks and a flashlight. And he said immediately that cover took him into an escape world. He said it was his escape world from the reality in his life. And he said it was the only thing that kept him from taking his life. And he became an artist because of it. And I think, wow, did Frank even know the depth of it? His art isn't just a visual, it's an emotional. And I see that these people who follow Frank, there's an emotional connection. And they have a favorite because there was that one piece that these people remember that actually pivoted them into a whole different time and space. It's just crazy to me to think that, you know, most people go to museums and they like visually looking at pieces of art, but Frank's art kind of bound people to it, which is crazy.
In this world, honestly, I'm not going to be cocky about this, but what my dad's art did to so many well-known producers, directors in this world has expanded the world and things that we enjoy in life because of him, because Lucas, Spielberg, all these big-time, you know, producers were inspired by my dad. Their direction went into Hollywood to make films and give us joy in other facets of life. You know, we get to see Spielberg's films, and we love that, and because he saw something as a young boy that gave him thought and used his inspiration and imagination to create that which we love. So it just fanned out into a viral, positive, viral specialty for the world, which is, you know, thank you to my dad and predecessors to him, and inspired my father as well. So
his art is highly inspirational. And Ellie would say to she always took the time when people would come in this museum and look through other artists' portfolios. And the reason they wanted this museum here was they wanted one person to come in this museum and one of these pieces inspire a thought, inspire an idea to then pivot into a whole new creation from this, a whole new being, a whole new.
Take an hour from a video game and do this for once. You know, just to do something creative that brings, you know, the inner you out.
So that's why we strive to keep this museum here, because we feel the same way. We feel that if one person, if one teenager comes in here, we need the next generation of artists to view this art, to be inspired, to create from this, to get an idea or a thought. And so that's why we kind of took it from Frank and Ellie, and we want to do the same thing. We want the next generation to be inspired by his art, because it's that important.
And it's very, because we're out in the country sort of from New York, even though very accessible from Philly, New York. To look at these paintings, to know, because the taxes and, overhead is very high, to think we could just sell one painting and our life changes overnight. Sit back on our yacht, but it takes tremendous, my wife to sit there and not, I tell her, because I don't want to have to work so hard, but I'm not selling a painting. No, don't sell a painting. You want to sell a painting? You get up.
But that's what
That's what my mother
Frank
did.
did. She
Did the same thing,
sacrificed.
right?
Yeah, she didn't.
So if we sell, my son said, if you sell one, that's selling. My wife's the same way. I mean, that's why we rely on the fans and the viewers here.
It's all of them who
all
keep
about
this
you coming
museum
in
here.
and to come in and donation to the museum, making purchases on the website, coming here and buying things. That's the only way this place stays alive. The museum sitting here by itself will not be a museum any longer. I mean,
We have
you need
thanking
fans
us
there.
for keeping this museum here, but we turn around and say, no, thank you, because we could never keep this museum open by ourselves. We could never do it. It's everyone who comes and supports it, and through merchandise, through visiting. We could never do that on our own. We could never do it.
Yeah, my dad has literally millions of fans, but everybody donated $1, which I'm not asking for. We're set. We'd expand the place. We'd do everything we could, but we're doing the best we can. After mom and dad's passing, it took a while to get things back in order. So, but I think the museum looks at least as good or better than it did
It's
before.
amazing.
Nothing taken from my mom, because before she housed 92 oil paintings. And because I didn't have 92 oil paintings, it's my collection. More of an insight to who my dad was behind the art. The whole transition of 3-year-old art. There's little sketches, there's anatomy studies that he did growing up, was 16, 18 years old, right up to the final painting he did, his left-handed art. So you see the whole genre of my dad's career.
This museum is like a biography of Frank. Each wall, there's 3 walls, front and back, and the oils span around the perimeter of the wall. The inside walls, there's 3 of those, front and back side. Those take you through the progression of his career. So it's kind of like you're walking through his career, through his life, which is really pretty amazing. There's more art in here now, though, than when your mom had it, because she had all the art. So she would switch them out, rotate them on a rotation basis. Since we are limited with what we have, everything is here for everyone to see. We don't have any other pieces anywhere but in here.
Originals hanging around.
No, they're all here. And we typically in a museum, there is an amount of space you're supposed to have between each piece of art. We have them very tight and close because we want everyone to see every piece of art that we have to show, to share. But we think it's spectacular. We're very proud of this museum.
If they were separated the way they weren't, it'd be even more impressive.
And these pieces of art, we could never, if we sold a piece, we could never afford to buy it back. This art is going we could never afford to buy it back. So once a piece of art goes, it goes forever. The public will never see that piece of art again. So once it's gone, it's gone. And we don't see a price tag on these pieces of art. We see that emotional, we see the feeling. We don't see dollar signs on it. And like Frank said, we could sell it and we could have a whole different life, but it's gone. It's gone. You won't be able to see it again. So.
Yeah, I hate to wake up in the morning and say, I wish I could get that back.
It's gone.
I wish
You
I
can't
could
get it back. No.
We appreciate that too. We appreciate this. I mean, the sacrifice that you guys are obviously making so that people can come and see the art. Because I mean, if somebody buys it and it's in their home, you can only see pictures of it, right? But by you guys making the sacrifice that you're making and not selling it, you're giving people the opportunity to see the actual piece. And I mean, that's beautiful. And I just want to say thank you. And do you guys have a web page where people can donate or can check it out, or learn more about Frank, so that we can help you as much as we can to keep this together, and so we can come and see it all together?
It's FrazettaMuseum.com. We have our website there. But again, thank you guys, because what you guys are doing is helping us to get exposure and helping to get people to know. There's a lot of people that don't even know we exist. So, you know, you're helping us by doing this, and thank you, because we appreciate this as well, because we need to get the word out. We need to let people know we're here, and to share this with everyone. And so thank you guys as well. So yeah, you can go to the www.FrazettaMuseum.com, and we have a huge store there. There's something that has to tempt somebody.
And what's really special about this museum is if you get the opportunity to show up, you get a tour, very insightful tour from somebody in the family. You're not getting somebody who was hired to the job and just goes through it nonchalantly. You will hear, we can answer as many questions that we know how to correctly, but you'll hear questions and we'll give you question and answer sort of things, and certain things my dad's left out, like you said, with some of the paintings and why he did it.
If you didn't have an emotional connection coming in, you have an emotional connection when you're leaving.
It was funny, I'll tell you a funny story. We had a little Italian woman come here looking at this painting here. And I'm describing it, she goes, "Is that a horse or is that a zebra?" And I said, and I know where she was coming from. So I said, "That's a horse." She goes, "No, horses don't run like that." And they don't. Horses gallop. If you look at the position of the horse's legs, horses are forward, back. He hasn't, and the reason my dad did that, because when he tried to paint it, it didn't look normal. It's like a professional baseball player. You see a snapshot of the picture, and his arm stops here, it looks awkward. It's the same with a horse. We tried to do a gallop, it just didn't work visually for him. So this is where that makes him special or beyond most artists, that he sees something differently, and it's not going to work unless he does this to it. But it has to be believable. One thing to distort it or change it, make it distance from reality, but if it doesn't work, it makes it worse.
Frank didn't do what was technically
Correct. Yeah.
correct. He did what was right for the painting.
And himself.
Yeah. And
every
that's
painting revolves. Every painting, before he started any painting, it was either a spherical shape, a square, a triangle. He had it already in his vision how this painting was going to work, and it revolves on its own. To where he'd have a moon in the background, Princess of Mars. The guy standing there with the girl with a sword up, and the sword goes straight out, and the moon behind it's a circle. But at the end of the sword, he put a little curve. So instead of seeing that sword straight across, like breaking the view of the moon, it had a little bend to it, and it would make you follow the moon and the planet around. This was a special little quality that put in there that most people won't understand. And that's why his keep you in that moment. It's hard to escape his paintings because there's shapes and there crisscrosses and arrows pointing it back towards the focal point.
They draw you in.
Yeah.
They just pull you right in that painting.
Oh yeah.
It's almost like the two center legs of the horse are like an X. Your subconscious picks up the X in its leg and keeps you there. The one to the left you can't see. There's another X, the girl and the girl's arm and the sword. It's crazy little things in their shapes. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I asked him about it because I never really wanted to know, or was I interested until I owned the museum. But I don't know if I asked him, I said, "Dad, was this something you knew that's how it had to be you did it? Or just because you're that high, elevated above everybody else, your eyes only saw it one way and it happened on its own?" You know, I never had the opportunity to ask you the answer, but not knowing probably makes it more interesting to have more of a conversation about it. Because you're going to get so many different answers from different people and nobody really knows. I don't believe that.
And just like that, you're kind of leaving a little bit of meat on the bone there. People are wanting more. And like you say, sometimes the theory and the conversation is just as rich as if, or even more so than if the actual fact of the matter was there for them. And so that's, like you say, drawing people in, that's good. That's what we want. I tell you what, guys, we are right at the hour mark, just a shade over right now.
We could talk. We could talk all day about different things.
And again,
bank account.
well, and see, just like that, we kind of want to leave people wanting a little bit more. So what we'll do for sure is, guys, we will leave a link to the Frazetta Art Museum in the comments on Facebook and in the description on YouTube. We'll link over to the Frazetta YouTube page as well. You guys are getting that off the ground. Just real quick, as far as before we wrap it all the way up, we always do final thoughts. So what I would like to do is I'd like to let our guests lead off with final thoughts. If you guys had something that we didn't touch on, that we didn't quite get around to, now is kind of the time to do that. And then Todd, after them, go ahead and wrap us up, okay?
All right.
Don't want to open, or hopefully you want to open, I guess, right?
Well, I said that in the beginning. We're Frazetta Art Museum in Pennsylvania. We're right now we're still in quarantine. They said that they're going to lift it. They're going to go into a next phase soon. So hopefully in the next month we'll be back open again. And thank you to everybody who has supported us through the quarantine, because again, we could not keep this museum open by ourselves. We're open every Thursday through Sunday from 10 to 4. Watch for when we reopen. And thank you guys for having us and helping us to put us out there.
And remember, an artist is nothing without a fan base. And because of you, his fans and art lovers is what made him who he is today. And my mom would there thank you, as well as my wife and I.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. I really enjoyed this. I could honestly sit here and listen to you guys talk about this. And I wish I lived close. I live in Georgia. I wish I lived closer to Pennsylvania. If I ever get there, I definitely want to come check it out. Because I mean, not only do you have some awesome artwork, but I mean, like you said, Frank designed the outside of the building. Frank Jr., you designed a lot of the inside of the building, right? So I mean, you're not only seeing like his paintings, you're seeing his architectural, just his overall artistic ability in all forms, and that's really cool.
He lived here. This is where he lived. His estate is as beautiful as the inside of this museum. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Maybe next time we'll do it outside.
Hey, I hope you guys are down for it next time. This was fun.
Absolutely. Right on. Well, guys, but we're going to wrap it up from here. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us and watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave comments. Let us know what you want to see in future episodes. Also want to kind of put a teaser out there for next week's episode. We're going to have a show favorite, Kara Nicole, on with us. She's got a new Kickstarter dropping, so don't want to miss that. Guys, thank you so much for joining us again. Todd, be
Peace
good
out,
or be
everybody.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
All right, thank you. Bye.